In this episode, we're going to talk about buy or build a home service business in 2025. Which is better? But this is a topic that I've been kicking around now for a couple of months. You hear the stories out there. There's a ton of guys now pushing this. Go out there, buy a basic, easy business. And it's so simple. You get an SBA loan and everybody can do it. Even if you're coming from corporate, you have no entrepreneurship background and no, business background, just go buy a business, right? And that's like the new hot topic. Let me tell you something. A lot of that is fluff. And a lot of those people that are selling those coaching programs and services are making more money in the coaching than they are in operating actual businesses. So you got to be careful on what's out there on the internet as far as, people pushing certain ideas. They want to make it seem so simple. And listen, owning a business is far from simple. It is very difficult. There are so many topics inside of a business that you as an owner have to have some comprehension of. You can't just be blind to certain topics. If you're not interested in finance, you can't be like, yeah, I'm just going to, hire someone for that. That's not how it works in business, guys. You have to be educated in those areas of business: finance, marketing, operations, leadership, all the things that comes with owning a business. You have to have some sort of history and education about it. Otherwise, you're going to learn on the fly. And that's what most of us do. I mean, I did it in the beginning, right? So I can't sit here and say that's not how I did it. I'm not saying you can't do that. You absolutely can. I did it. It took me 15 years to figure it out. 15 years of mistakes. And I'm talking big money mistakes. And you're going to make them. So tying a new business to a new entrepreneur to a personal guarantee, in my opinion, is not something I would do. That's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. And maybe it's because of my history with personal guarantees. It's just not something I would recommend. Now, if you have experience in a certain industry and you have some experience with operations and running a business in a certain industry, then maybe it's not that bad of an idea to go get a personal guarantee. If you know you can do it and you can buy a solid company and you have the background, maybe it's not the worst idea. And I kicked that around because I could do that, right? I could go get an SBA loan. I could put my house up as a collateral, and that's what they make you do. Any asset you have, they're going to make you put up as collateral. So if that business goes down, they're coming for everything. I could easily do that. I go buy someone's business, someone that's doing $2 million. Maybe they're netting 500 grand. They want a 3 times multiple. So it's 1.5 million. Here's the other downside to it, guys. You're going to get into this business. You are now stepping into a business that was being operated by somebody else. So now all the employees have a new owner. And it's not that simple just to walk into a business and be like, hi, I'm the new owner. You are going to listen to me now. I'm the boss, right? It usually is not like a super smooth transaction and a transition from my experience and from, the stories I've read. Okay. It could be very difficult dealing with employees that are now worried about their job. Maybe they're going to start looking for other places to work because they're thinking you're going to run it differently or you're going to run it into the ground or whatever the case may be. It can be very difficult dealing with employees. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. Obviously, people buy businesses all day long, right? You could buy a business. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just giving you pros and cons of both options. Okay, so these are some of the things you got to think about. Transitioning could be very difficult. And if you don't know how to get into that business and see where the weaknesses are, right? So if you have certain strengths, like my strengths are finance, marketing, systems and processes, efficiencies. That's where I'm really strong. Operations, yeah, I'm okay with operations. Do I love that? No. Do I love managing people? No. That's not like my super strength. It's just not. It's just, I'll be straight up. That's just not my strength. Taking a process and breaking it down to super simple terms and making a very simple process, taking something that usually takes 4 hours, getting it done for an hour, or maybe outsourcing part of it so it's cost like a quarter of the price. I like that type of stuff. I like marketing, figuring out where to spend the money. I love that. Finances, diving into the P&L and finding out where we could pull some levers to, increase the profit margins. Love that. Those are things I love to do. So I know where my strengths are and my weaknesses. So if I'm going to go into a business, I want to try to buy a business that doesn't have those things, right? So the business that I have looked at, because again, I've been contemplating this for a couple months, I've looked at companies, and I'm not going to reveal the industries, but I've looked at some companies and I've looked at a couple different industries, but I'm releasing a documentary in the very near future here that's going to track my progression in a new startup in the residential home services. So I'm not going to reveal the secrets yet, but that documentary will start to drip out over the next couple of weeks here, next couple of months. And I'm really excited about it because I think it'll be a lot of value for anybody in the home service industry that wants to know about how do you get into a home service business? And we'll talk about it. Did I buy a business? Am I going to turn it around and grow it and sell it? Or am I going to bootstrap a business? So we're going to talk about that. And that's one of the reasons why I want to make this video, because this is something I've been bouncing around. Do I buy a business? Again, I could get in there and I could find companies, which I've already sat with a few companies where, they've been in business. One company, 5.5 million top line revenue. Great, right? That's a decent sized business. No marketing. They've done no marketing. It's 2025. They barely have a website. I mean, they have a website, but it's nowhere to be found on the internet unless you literally type in the URL, an exact match, then you're going to find them. But if you're typing in for the service that they provide, they don't exist. They're not on Google, basically. I'm like, how is this possible in 2020? And they're doing 5.5 million in top line revenue. Owner's very old school. He's built a ton of connections over the last 35 years. Those things, in a way, could be good, right? But they also could be detrimental. He's built these relationships. That means him as the owner is connected to those people. So he's built those relationships. If I step in as the new owner, yeah, I could turn up the heat on some marketing and I could start generating some leads, but it basically is like a brand new business that doesn't exist on the internet. So it's almost the same as starting a brand new company because they literally don't exist. Yes, he has a reputation, so he's going to have some name recognition through his referral network. But if he leaves and a big portion of those people decide, I'm just going to make up a name. I like dealing with Jim. Jim's no longer there. I'm not using you guys anymore. Jim was my contact. And that's what's going to happen because it's happened to me in the past or when I've purchased companies in the past. And you're going to lose some of that market share. So that 5.5 million top line and you're paying off the profits. Just hypothetically, he's profiting $1 million a year. You're going to pay a multiple, or I was going to pay a multiple on this profit that could almost overnight disappear. Does that really make a lot of sense? Doesn't make sense to me. So I decided against that. And that's not the direction I'm going in. So I sat with a couple other companies over the last, couple of months here. And just to give you an idea of another situation where there was a father who owned the business, and then he had a son-in-law that was involved in the business as well. Initially, they wanted to do some kind of partnership where I would come in, help them grow it, and we would exit in 3 to 5 years. We had worked out some details. It sounded like it could be a good potential partnership. But then when we got kind of down to the nitty gritty, I had a conversation with the son-in-law and he was like, yeah, the old man wants to leave, but I think I want to stay and run this business for the next 10 to 15 years. Well, that was out of the picture for me because I wasn't looking for a long-term partner. I was looking for a short-term 3 to 5 year partner that I could help grow and scale and increase the value and then exit over the next 3 to 5 years. We weren't on the same page. And that's the problem with partnerships, right? A lot of times it's hard to get on the same page with your partners. So after that experience, I decided, maybe I should entertain starting a business. So let's think about it. Let's think about the pros and cons, right? So we just went through some of the cons of, buying a business. Obviously, we could hit up on the pros. I mean, the pros is a lot of times you buy the right business, you're stepping into a already well-oiled machine that's already generating revenue. So you literally day one, you're stepping into a machine that's kicking out profits. So that profit should be enough to pay off your loan and have enough to pay yourself and have enough left over to help grow the business. Because if it doesn't, then you're paying, you're overpaying, right? You got to have enough money to pay for the loan, pay yourself a decent salary, plus have some money left over so you could grow the business. Because that's the whole idea. You don't want to just buy a business and just keep it status quo because you have a huge loan to pay off. You want to grow that company so you could pay that loan off faster. Okay. You might have a 10, 11 year loan to the SBA, but you don't want to take 10 or 11 years if you don't have to. The goal is to get in, grow the business, take every penny you're making and dump it back into the business. That would be my plan, right? And that should be yours if you're buying a company with an SBA loan. You want to get rid of that personal guarantee, get rid of that bank as quickly as possible. That should be your objective. So the pro is you're getting in there, you're getting revenue day one. Okay. So that is the biggest benefit of buying a business. You have employees day one. So you have a lot of these things that are going for you when you buy a business. So those are the pros, in my opinion. Now let's talk about starting a business. Well, again, if you have no experience in home services or if you've no experience in any type of entrepreneurship, bootstrapping a business could be difficult too, right? I mean, you're gonna start off and you're gonna have no name, nothing, no employees, and now you never never even ran a company before. So it's like it might be hard to sell an employee to come work with you. It's like if you really don't have any history. Now, when I started my business and I left my family business, I already had experience basically growing a residential division with inside of my family business, which was doing all commercial. I started a residential division. So I had a ton of experience ground up, basically bootstrapping a business in that industry. So when I started hiring people, well, of course, I went to my family at that time, sister-in-law, cousin, and that's how I kind of did it. And they worked for me part-time because I didn't have work every day. When you bootstrap a business, you're not going to have work every day. So you have to figure, okay, what's my overhead going to be? How much am I going to lay out? For how long do I expect to pay this before I start having revenue come through the front door? And obviously you want to turn revenue as quickly as you can. And you don't want to cover that, right? So you want to really work out the numbers of what it's going to cost you to carry this business. So the pros of bootstrapping is you have no personal guarantee. So yes, you're going to have some risk because you're going to lay out some money, but you're also going to lay out some money if you buy a company too. They're going to require at least 10% down. Okay, maybe you could bring a partner in, right? And they put the 10%, you give them some equity, but most of the time you're putting that 10% down. So if you're buying $1.5 million business, you got to come up with 150 grand. Well, let me tell you something. I bootstrapped my first business with $8,000 to my name, and I had no equity, no assets. I had nothing. I was a 28-year-old kid. I had $8,000 to my friggin' name, and that money was like the money I had to pay my mortgage and feed my family. Like I did not have a lot of money, and I took every last penny of that money and I turned it into $1.3 million in revenue in 12 months, with needing hundreds of thousands of dollars in heavy equipment, big insurance, employees with specialized licenses. It was no small feat. I had called in favors every which way I could, got a decent spot to rent. But anyways, you can do it for a very small amount of money. This time around, I have a little bit of money behind me. So again, if I'm going to buy a business that's generating $500,000 in profit, I would expect to pay somewhere around $1.5 million for that business. $1.5 million times 10% down, that's 150 grand. So if I'm going to throw 150 grand on a down payment to buy a decent sized business, can I get a business off the ground for a lot less than that? Well, my opinion is yes, you can. And I'm talking doing it really right, not really bootstrapping. I mean, you are, but I think my opinion is within $50,000 is pretty comfortable to get to my first sale. I think that's very reasonable. I could probably do it for a lot less if I really wanted to and really stretch it. I could do it for a lot less. But I've done it so many times, I don't want to put myself through it. So I'm thinking, this is what I'm thinking. This is the pro of starting a company as opposed to buying is 50 grand, no personal guarantee. And with my experience in marketing and operations and sales and finance, I feel very confident that I'm going to get the phone number to ring pretty quickly and I'll be able to make sales pretty quickly, regardless of the industry I go in. So I feel very confident with that. And that's a big fear when you're starting a business. How are you going to generate leads? How are you going to sell those leads? How are you going to perform the work? There's a lot that goes into it, right? And you got to find the right people. That's what it's about, finding the right people. But those people cost money. So you're going to have to lay out money. So that is the downside to bootstrapping is if you can't generate leads, you might churn through a lot of your money initially. And it could take a couple months to get to the point where you're profitable. And that could be the case. So you have to be prepared for that. You got to understand what your overhead is. You have to really dial your overhead in down to every penny of what you think you're going to spend. And that I'm talking everything: insurance, rent, materials, clothing. I mean, everything, marketing spend, equipment rental if you need equipment, truck costs if you're buying trucks, vans, insurance, auto insurance, general liability, workman's comp. These are the things you got to think about, and you got to dial that in to know what your overhead's going to be. And remember, you're not going to have any revenue day one, so you're going to have to expect to pay that. In my opinion, I would figure at least 90 days of that overhead to be safe. Now, you should know your break-even point. What that means is you're going to figure out what your gross profit margin is going to be. Gross profit is essentially after you take out all the direct cost, okay, and that's what's left over. And then you have The leftover is called gross profit. You need that to pay all your overhead. And then after you pay your overhead, you should have at least 10, 15, 20% left for the business as a net profit. So you got to work those numbers and figure out what your break even point is. And this way you'll have an idea in your head, like, okay, I need to sell, if my average ticket is 10,000 or 5,000 or 20,000, whatever your average ticket is, you can back it in. You can figure out exactly what your break even number is. So you have in your mind, okay, the minimal goal for break even, just so I cover my bills, is X amount of jobs. Well, if I'm closing at 50%, if I need 5 jobs, that means I need 10 leads a month. Okay, well, now how do I get 10 leads a month? Well, now you got to start thinking about marketing. How can I go get 10 leads a month? I mean, 10 leads over a 30-day period is not that many leads. You should be able to drum up 10 leads a month on your own, knocking doors if you have to. I mean, I'm talking knocking all your referral network and calling people that you know in your network. You should be able to generate 10 leads a month. So, I mean, that's just my experience. And then obviously you start turning on some real ads, Facebook ads, Google ads. You could go to the directories, you could do those too, but there's ways to do it to generate 10 leads. I feel like that should be pretty simple in home services, but that's it. That's the pros and cons. I mean, thinking about weighing both, what makes sense for you as an entrepreneur. And I know this is a controversial topic because, like I said, a lot of people make it sound so simple. Oh, just go get a business loan. What they don't explain to you is that you got to get a personal guarantee. And if you have no experience in that industry, you're going to have to figure it out while having a massive amount of debt put on the business from day one, which is not a comfortable way to operate a business. Believe me, guys. I've done it both ways. I was completely strapped with debt, and then I went from that to no debt. And, the operations is so much simpler and less stressful when you're not strapped with debt. Okay. Yes, you have your typical overhead. Obviously, you can't run a business without that. But if you're also strapped with debt, bad debt, loans, and, an SBA loan tied to a personal, believe me, you're not sleeping at night. Okay. If you got a customer that slow pays you, or you miss out on an invoice, or your office messes up and doesn't invoice a client, you don't realize it for a couple of weeks. Like, these are the things that like, holy shit, like, you could really get stressed out real fast, because it's like every penny counts, and you got that nut coming every month from the loan. And it's like, holy shit, if you don't get that dialed in, and you don't get that cash flow coming in, man, you're not billing quickly, getting your money quick, you're going to have a problem. You're going to be stressed out real fast, especially when you don't understand the industry. As opposed to bootstrapping it, okay, you got to put up, let's say, the same amount of money roughly, but you don't have a massive personal guarantee tied to it, right? You just have the initial upfront cost to get the first job, basically. And then you can start turning one job into a 2, and then 3 and 4, and boom, before you know it, you're covering your overhead. The main goal is to keep your overhead as low as possible initially, and you kind of slowly scale into it. And that's it. That's kind of my viewpoint of buying versus bootstrapping. I'm going to make that decision here in the next week or two. And then, like I said, I'm going to put out a documentary, and you can follow my journey on whichever direction I decide to go. It's going to be all documented in this YouTube channel. And we're going to talk a little bit about every aspect of business. We're going to dive into finance. We're going to dive into marketing topics. What type of marketing we're going to do initially. We're going to talk about naming the company, branding the business. What type of vehicles am I going to choose for the business if I go that route? Okay, if I'm bootstrapping. We're going to also talk about every aspect of business you could think of. Operations, hiring, who I'm hiring first, why I'm hiring this person, why I'm letting this person go. I'm going to kind of go through it all and talk about issues that are popping up throughout the process. I'm going to try to do one episode a week as the journey progresses to talk about everything. I'm going to reveal my finances. I'm going to show you my P&L. We're going to deep dive into P&L. We're going to talk about why certain line items on the P&L are important and why they help make strategic decisions with, growth and marketing and operations and all that stuff. So I'm excited about it because I feel like you guys should get a lot of value out of this. Especially if you're brand new in business and you want to learn every aspect of business, this is all free content, guys. I'm literally just putting it out there for you. And I hope you get some value out of it. There will be no holding back. I mean, I'm releasing everything, what my marketing campaigns are going to be. I mean, down to every little nuance of how I'm going to do what I'm going to do, whether that's buy a business and grow it. Because again, growth mindset is going to be there, whether I'm buying a business or I'm bootstrapping. we are going to see every aspect of what decisions I'm making, when I'm making, why I'm making them. And I think that'll bring a lot of value to you guys if you're in home services and you're also thinking about either buying or starting a home service business. So follow along, and I look forward to making more content for you guys.